yo, Easy.
What's up, guys? My name is Evan Duvall. This is Eazy Does It. Thank you for joining us. All right, guys, what's going on? Welcome to Easy's Listening Room and Studio. We're back for another Eazy Does It podcast. I'm bringing in my friend today, Robb Kendrick. Let's bring that mic over, Robb. Let's grab that mic.
Yep.
Cool, man. Well, so Robb and I were introduced through community and family. We heard of each other in our travels and everything long before we actually met. We sat down last week and met for the first time,
Right.
And started having this conversation about his career. And I'll let Robb do the introduction of just kind of what brought us to this point today.
Okay. I grew up in Spur, Texas, and the panhandle of Texas, and wanted to be a truck driver because it was the only way I thought I could get out of that small town and see a little bit of America and grow a little bit. And when I was in high school, I picked up photography and was just self-taught and decided I wanted to pursue this, but my family really didn't know how to support that because nobody in my family ever did anything creative. And you know, it led me to East Texas State University, and I had a great instructor there, and photography has taken me to 84 countries and all 7 continents, and so a little bit broader than a truck driver maybe, but it's been a great experience.
We first got linked up. I was planning on doing the Pacific Crest Trail hike, and I needed some gear as I was getting out of the military. And I had my permits and everything, and then I got in touch with Robb because he had worked with Patagonia before, and got me some deals on a bunch of gear as I was about to set off on this 4-month hike down from the border of Canada all the way down to the border of Mexico, and that's how I was going to transition out of the Navy.
Right.
And like 3 weeks before my trip, they revoked all the 2021 passes for the trail. So plans changed, did a quick pivot, came home to Austin, and I'm super glad I did. I can't imagine not getting started on the 4 months that transpired upon arriving home, but incredibly generous. And then I started hearing stories about, you know, who Robb was. I knew I wanted to meet him, at least have a coffee.
Right.
But it's interesting to mic up these conversations and share them because there's so much value to be, you know, shared in just a simple conversation of who someone is, where they come from, and then, you know, breaking down a career as beautiful as 32 years shooting for National Geographic. I knew this guy had some stories. And the first project that I heard about and caught my eye was this Cowboy project.
Right.
And I'll let Robb explain kind of how that transpired.
You know, I grew up in the panhandle, like I said, and a lot of family members worked on ranches, and I'd been around these people, and I really respected the fact that they really weren't interested in anything other than pursuing their own passion and not necessarily making money and working really hard. And so I proposed a story to Geographic to look at the evolution of the cowboy from Mexico all the way up to Canada, and I wanted to do it in this historic process using tintypes, and they bit off on it, and so I got to drive 41,000 miles from northern Mexico all the way up to British Columbia and every state west of the Mississippi, and photograph on 68 ranches, and had just an amazing time to get out on all this private property and meet some really interesting people that had, you know, pretty simple but focused passions, and just had a great time with them.
Yeah, I think it's an incredible story, and I'm so glad that we're continuing to share it because there's so much truth to it today. In America, the squeakiest wheel gets the grease, it seems, you know, and we often forget that maybe the loudest narrative isn't always the truest. There's a lot more to the story about the majority of our country that lives in very simple manners, and we can't forget that is truly who we are in our hearts. And this project and the way we grew up in Central Texas, it reminds me of my childhood, of growing up in Dripping Springs, Texas, and spending my time horseback, and just what that taught me as a kid. Long before I really knew how special it was. It just was. I knew there was work involved. I knew there was expenses involved. But what horses gave me from a young age was just respect for an animal and the power that they yield, and hearing these stories that we're about to share with y'all from this project is just that teaches a human being so much, and it goes back a long time.
And I think on this project, I wanted to capture the voices of these people, because they have a very beautiful way of speaking, and they use very specific words, but it's not intentional. It is intentional, but it's very natural. It's they choose their words because they know who they are, and they believe in what they do. So
I think
a lot of these audio things that you'll hear, Evan's condensed some of them down, but if you listen to them just straight, there wasn't any editing in some of them. It's just one line coming out. So
yeah, I thought that was beautiful, that there wasn't a lot of work on the editing side, because they had spent enough time in their heads and they were clear on their message, because it's just who they are. Like, they've had the time, they've had the space, they're not overly stimulated, and so they're not confused as we are with so much stimulation and so many avenues or pursuits that we can take as individuals. Their path is clear, and we can all be inspired by that and try to find that daily. You'll hear the stories, and one thing that caught my ear and I was fixated on was, like, at first glance you may not think that like they're speaking intelligently, but when you really listen to the nature of their words and the wisdom that is coming through, there is no doubt that these are wise, intelligent individuals, and you don't need a college degree or 3-letter syllables after your word or whatever's going on to show people who you are and what your worth is.
Exactly.
It's just enough. So before we get into the photos and these stories, I would like to describe the Tintype process.
Okay.
I read in the afterword it was very involved, and that was something that was also interesting to me, was long hair, earrings, coming in on these working ranches and presenting like, hey, I want to take photos of y'all, and from my impression, like, you had a uphill battle of kind of getting these guys respect for some of them. And
yeah, I think photographers show up all the time on ranches, and they think photographers have the easiest job in the world, just taking pictures. But I was using this 70-pound camera, and everything was a lot of work, and I had a portable darkroom, and they could come in this 14-foot trailer and see how hard it was to make each individual plate. And, on first arrival, you get a lot of shit from these guys, and you just got to give it back to them in a respectful way. You can't cower down, because they don't respect that. If you can throw it right back in their face and they get a laugh out of it, you're making progress. And I knew that just growing up around these guys. And so, long hair, earring, I would just throw it back and give it back to them. And I can't tell you how many of these guys I still stay in touch with. Few of them I've lined up and gotten married. They got in the book and wanted me to introduce them to girls. And I said, you got to come to this museum opening. And one guy, Tom Bowerman, he came to every museum opening I had, and I kept introducing him to, attract it. And he ended up marrying Devin, and they've been married 16 years. So said, I'm not responsible for it. I just
yeah. You'll hear the wit and the humor that comes through in these recordings, and it reminds us that that's what gets you through hard work. You got to have a sense of humor about you, to deal with the elements in that way. I saw a lot of that throughout my Navy training and being in some pretty shitty spots where, you know, the only way to get through was really with a smile and, you know, a cock of an eye and you know, those that are around you and just relentlessly ripping on each other. But there's so much to be said to do that in a respectful manner. And I just want to go ahead and get into these photos. Sure. Because you'll start to hear these audio clips, and I want y'all to take a moment to just start to connect these voices, these stories with these faces. And I think it's a beautiful way. So we can go ahead and take off the headphones. We'll give it a listen, and we'll throw them right back on.
Royce Hanson is my name. I was born in eastern South Dakota, born and raised on a farm. Went to work at early age, Missouri River Breaks. From there on, just cowboyed my whole life. Several states, South Dakota, Wyoming, Montana, Idaho, Nevada. Now back here in Montana, and it's just a way of life that come easy, solitude, God, nature, and animals.
My name's Ronnie Melton. I grew up in Odessa, Texas, on the western side of Texas. First job I ever really had was when I was 12 for Hooper Cattle Company, and from there on it's been a life now.
Just in case, I was born in Idaho and moved to Oklahoma and just kind of come back up here, just cowboyed around a little, you know. Worked in several feed yards and outfits all over. And, well, you know, just like to aggravate cows, you know. I eat beef to get even, so.
My name is Dan Locke, and I work for Van Norman Ranches in Tuscarora, Nevada. I'm originally from Lodi, California, and how I got into ranching is it's something I've always wanted to do. My dad was a cowboy, and my grandpa was a cowboy, and as far back in my pedigree as it goes, we were all cowboys. It's pretty unique. I think that's why we were made the way we are, so that we could ride horses. I mean, that's why we were split in the middle, so we can throw a leg over each side and go somewhere on horseback. That's the way I feel. I don't know. Yeah.
That was awesome. That was good. I'm Steve Etchison. I'm 27 years old. Live down here at the JA's, just down here at Paladera, Texas. I'm married. I got 4 boys, and they go from 6 years old down to 1 month old, and they all want to punch cows for a living, and they're probably going to get their chance down here because we ain't leaving. I sure wouldn't want to live in town ever again. And if that day ever happens, hopefully the only day when I go to town is the day they're putting me in the ground. After that, I don't much care for town anyways.
My name is Jody Miner. I've been born and raised in Montana and raised in the cowboy lifestyle. I guess I went from being a cow boss's daughter to being a cow boss's wife. I'm proud of what I do. I'm proud to be a cowboy or cowgirl, however you want to word it. I read a quote once I've always remembered it because it really meant a lot to me when I read it. I can't tell you. The best thing about being a woman or a cowgirl is having the ability to work like a man, but the wisdom to know when to be a lady. And I've always thought that was really neat, and I feel like I try to live my life kind of along those same lines.
My name's Tom Morehouse, and I'm 59 years old, and I was born and raised on a ranch between Benjamin and Guthrie, Texas, that my dad owned, Morehouse Ranch, and actually that's the only place I've ever lived. I don't remember the first time I rode, and I don't remember the first time I smelled burning hair from a branded calf. And I couldn't tell you how to ride a horse, because it just seems to me that anybody could ride a horse, because that's the way it was for lots of cowboys. They were just born around horses and rode before they were old enough to remember.
My name is Roger Peters. My wife Carrie and I own and operate the Dragging Y Cattle Company in Beaverhead County, Montana. My family had a small ranch in northern Colorado. It got kind of pressured from population there, so we moved up here in 1972. Now we see people starting to move to Montana, but I don't know where we'd go next. I don't know where you'd find any more open country, so this is probably where we'll stay. We've raised 7 kids on the ranch. We've got one daughter, 3 years to go, and then we'll have them all raised on the ranch, and that was our big goal, because kids learn a lot of responsibility and initiative working around livestock and taking care of little bum calves that kind of depend on you for everything. So we tend to stay outside all day, every day, and if things get tough around this part of the world, all you got to do is look up at the mountains and gaze around you a little bit, and it sure makes you happy to be here. I tell everybody I've never worked a day in my life. It's all been fun.
Whew.
Some memories.
Yeah, man, I'm sure.
Yeah.
I can only imagine what that brings up, but I want to dive into it, man. The first thing that speaks to me throughout those pictures, utilizing the Tintype process, is how timeless those pictures look. And this was 2004, right?
Right.
And so, I mean, this is a pretty modern, way of cowboying, and you look at their outfits and the utility of their wear, and there's nothing excess, but I mean, it could look like late 1800s, early 1900s in a sense, especially the ones where, they've got their families. They're just very simple.
Right. Well, I think the tools of being a cowboy haven't changed in over, since it started.
Right.
Everything's still done. All the gear they're wearing. I mean, these guys right here that are buckaroos, which are Nevada, California, parts of Oregon, they all wear these flat brimmed hats and tooled brush cuffs and big wild drags, and they do that because they don't make a lot of money, but these guys spend their money on their gear because they want to look what they call punchy. They want to look good for the girls, and so the young single feral guys spend all their money on gear trying to attract girls, and they like to look good themselves. They're kind of proud of it, but it's also very functional stuff. You'd never see anybody in Texas wear this because you've got mesquite trees and cactus and things like that. So why would you spend all this money on hand-tooled brush cuffs and things that are just going to get torn up? So every region, Texas has its look, buckaroos have their look, and it's interesting because there's just subcultures within it. But the tools, I mean, an iPhone would be about the biggest thing you'd see that these guys have now, and they'll pull their horses in a gooseneck trailer so that's gotten more efficient. But once they're working the cattle, it's basically hasn't changed.
Yeah. I think when I was thumbing through the book as well, how it opened up in with that essay, about there's this woman that was invited to the Queen's Palace and for a party, and the invitation basically said to wear your country's formal wear or business attire. And so when she showed up at this party, she felt so out of place as an American, because all of these other countries had such beautiful, garbs and traditional wear that represented who their culture was. And it got her thinking about, what does a typical American dress like, and we extend those thoughts. Is that, the cover of a fashion magazine? Is that streetwear? Is it business attire? What is it,
Right.
And so to see, your photographs capture that, that remind us of, just, a very simple, way of getting the job done and wearing clothes that help you do that, and to capture that in a still shot in tintype was just, it's beautiful translation.
Yeah, well, I think the process does actually correlate with the start of ranching in this country, because the process is from 1853, so it kind of syncs right in with the time that ranching started. So.
Yeah, I heard one of the guys talking about we're not using four-wheelers out here, we're still horseback.
Right, exactly.
That was something I always learned was, you fancy it up with technology and you're just asking for problems. Like, it's going to break at some point. So keep it simple, and we can all learn from that as we go into life. And look, we are in the middle of a city. We're here in Austin, Texas. This is a period of growth. There's everywhere we turn. There's parties. There's events. There's job offerings. Everything is exploding. But just to have it in the back of your mind of how simple life can be, at least on the side of your perspective, can be enough to reset you. So for us, that might be a swim in the springs, or a walk on the greenbelt or in nature. But thankfully, Austin, Texas is a place where you can get intertwined with nature pretty quickly, instead of just being isolated in the middle of the city.
Well, I think like Roger Peters, the last guy, said, just stop and look, take that moment to just stop and appreciate what is around you, whether it's another person or the beauty of the place, but just stop for that moment and take it in. So
yeah, it's usually not far.
Right,
You just gotta
exactly.
just be looking for it. So Rob, I want to talk more about kind of what this project has given you. Is there any sense that this is a major project, a major effort to visit this many states and work your way into these ranches? But I just imagine that the lessons that you take away and still have to look upon and cherish, and walking through your house, there's no shortage of memories up on your walls, and these are just a few.
I mean, I think the main thing is, I was always kind of a person that wasn't what would you call it, an introvert extrovert. I'm not somebody that will put myself out there very easily, but you give me a camera and I'm very interested in people, but the camera was the vehicle that allowed me to go meet people and ask questions and get nosy. And so, meeting so many of these people, there's a handful that probably I wouldn't care to connect with again, but I would say probably 95% of them I would definitely spend time with again. And there's probably 80 of these people, mainly guys, but that I stay connected with on a pretty frequent basis. Just, we're, Steve Etchison, the guy who said he's got the 4 boys, he shot his foot off with a shotgun 8 years ago, so he's not cowboying, but I just stay in touch with a lot of these people because, we made a connection.
Yeah, I think that's really unique and interesting, place to position yourself, and having a platform such as National Geographic to get your foot in the door. But that's a good reminder for us all to pay attention and put the value in the relationships, and those will last if you focus on that and truly treat people right.
Well, I think treating people right. A few of the ranches I wanted to get on had a policy that they wouldn't allow photographers any longer because they had bad experiences. And so in all 3 cases, I just said, do you know Bob Morehouse at the Pitchfork Ranch? And they said, oh, we know of Bob. And I said, well, I'll give you his phone number. You can call him and ask him if I'm respectful and, low maintenance, and see if that'll help. And all 3 of them called Bob up, and Bob said, he's been coming on this ranch for 20 years. You can let him in. And all 3, so it was that I was respectful in the past led me to get the keys to 3 places that were shut off. So, but I think it's important to do that.
Beautiful, man. Well, I think we'll get into some other stories, man.
Okay.
That's an amazing project, and I hope y'all take a moment after the podcast to look at these pictures, and I'll point you in the direction of Robb's work. There's a lot of hidden gems in the simplicity of this book and these photos, and I'll continue to think back on them, I'm sure, as Robb does every day.
Okay.
But let's move into the coal mine situation. This was incredibly interesting to me, to hear about just how you worked your way into these mines. And
right. That was the last story I did for National Geographic, which was 2015, and I did a story on global dependence on coal, and the environment. Other than people, the environment's the most important thing to me, and so I really wanted to do this story, but didn't realize that it was going to be the hardest story I ever did for National Geographic, and it was because of the internet and phones. All of a sudden, back in '86 when I would go to China or wherever, I could just be anonymous and roam around, but in 2015, in China, I was in the dirtiest city in the world, 10 years running, and I had people photographing me, sending it to the local police department, and it just became a whole different. But so by far the hardest story I ever had to do, but one I was passionate about trying to tell. And in China, I was telling Evan at dinner tonight that the Chinese government wouldn't let me in the mines. And so I just went to a mine, left the interpreter on the side, and I just jumped on the employee bus and with a bunch of miners. And I was like, well, the worst thing that's going to happen is I'm going to get, arrested. And, when you have an American passport, you have this blind faith that you're invincible, and it's probably pretty blind. But I didn't have any problems there. I did have problems in India. I don't know what pictures are up there, but like that picture there, these people, they spend 14 hours a day throwing rocks off of that belt, separating the rocks from the coal. And you can tell that they're just sucking in coal dust. And 14 hours a day, I think they made $2 a day. And there's definitely no OSHA safety in that. I mean, people get caught in those belts all the time, but that was a place that I got into just by hopping the fence, and I did get kicked out of there twice over a week, but made the pictures. And I think, the people in the photos never challenged me or never, and I think in a way they were supportive of me kind of showing their condition. They didn't have a lot of control over their condition, and having me there to take the pictures, they never had any pushback. So I just kind of felt like they wanted it seen. And India, the mines there are illegal, and they're 50 feet by 50 feet, and it took a while. I found it's kind of like, instead of the drug cartels in Mexico, there it's the illegal coal mining cartels. And the interpreter I'd used since '92 said it's very dangerous. We got there, we connected with a hotel owner and asked to get access to these mines, and a guy showed up that was in his late 30s, and he and I connected right away, and his family owned a lot of these illegal mines, and he took me to one, and it was 600 feet down. And I don't know if that picture with the rickety ladders,
that was the first one.
It's just 600 feet down, 50 feet at a time going. And these guys weigh 105 pounds, and they're going down, and there's water shooting out. And back then I weighed about 175 pounds, and I had all my gear. And the first few steps I took, I mean, those steps weren't going to hold. And so they lowered me down in a bucket that they'd haul the coal out. So I went down 600 feet, worked down there for several hours, and then they pulled me out. And when they were pulling me out, they had a guy walking up that ladder with a rope to make sure the full bucket didn't swing and knock all the ladders out. And I was telling Evan, we got about 150 feet up, and the thing dropped about 6 feet. And we went up a little bit higher, and it dropped again about a foot. And the guy holding the rope had a really concerned look on his face. And I'm like, okay, if he's concerned, I probably should be concerned. And the guy running the makeshift crane, which was 3 I-beams welded together with a Honda generator, he was up there with shorts and flip-flop, kind of like I am, except and he was running my life up there. So we got up to about 500 feet, and it dropped another 4 feet, and I was like, I am never coming down in one of these mines again if I get on the ground again. And I got off, and that night I went into the hotel, and I looked at my digital work, and I was like, I'm going back. So the next day I went to another mine, and I mean, the pictures were just amazing. So, but you know, it was a challenging project and something that turned out to be, for Geographic, I think the 3rd most read story that year was that project.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yeah, I was just thinking, you know, through this project, as I was looking through these photos, and I spoke about this with a friend yesterday, just kind of, you know, do you ever look around and just wonder, like, how did I get here? You know, and you can usually add up the pieces, but sometimes it's just beautiful and amazing. And, you know, I can't imagine the situations you found yourself in around the world, you know, as your job took you, you know, into these very unseen places, and like you said, kind of giving the voiceless a voice, and being able to do that with a tool, and you had refined this craft, and to do that for 32 years is amazing. You know, the stories and the places and the people, and everything. Another thing that, you know, caught my attention was, you know, how your career kind of came to an end. And it's something that I really want to touch on tonight, was obviously we all use technology in different ways. We all, you know, look at our crafts and the way we do our jobs differently. And, you know, to hear the perspective of a guy that worked for, you know, National Geographic for 32 years, and then the story of kind of how it ended was beautiful to me.
Well, yeah. So there was a new editor that came on at National Geographic, and I was about to leave in 2 weeks to go on a 2-month project, and she came on board, and I was the only one that didn't do social media, the only photographer that worked there that didn't do social media. And she put her foot down and said, if you want to leave on this, even though I had a signed contract and they were bound by it, she said, you can't do this story unless you do Instagram and Facebook. And I just told her, I said, I don't, those are tools. I just don't use those tools. And my kids are on Instagram, and my mother, their grandmother, has to send me pictures because I don't know how to access it, don't want to know how to access it, and never had anything. And so I just said, no, I'm good with punting. And she's like, you're not going to go? And I'm like, no, I'm not going to do social media. I don't use it. And if that's the criteria, then I'm done. And so that was it. I closed the books and I sold all my gear. My phone is my camera now. And I'm totally fine with that. I mean, It's 32 years. It's a chapter, and loved every minute of it, and got to do more in my life than I ever thought I would, and meet so many great and interesting people. But I was ready for, something else, not to be forced to do something. And I'm not, if you use it, and most people do, that's fine. It works for you. It's cool. It's not, doesn't work for me.
Yeah.
I've seen too many people get in fights with people they don't even know about, usually about politics. And I'm just like, it's poisonous. Yeah. So.
Well, it's definitely a tool, and I always say if you're not using it and it's using you, and if you don't need to use it at all, then don't.
Yeah.
But a lot of us in this room do.
Oh, yeah.
And that's why I wanted to kind of bring that up, is just to assume that it's something that we have to do. There's always a way to reconnect and bring it back, to real moments like this and conversations and sharing space. It's having a presence on social media. It can be used to raise awareness and to expose people to perspectives that they wouldn't ordinarily hear, but it's ultimately not the direction that we want to go.
Well, I think it is a great tool. There's a photographer, Jimmy Chen, who's an incredible climbing photographer.
Amazing.
And when there was the accident in the Khumbu icefall up in Everest Base Camp, and all the Sherpas died.
Yeah.
He got together with 5 photographers that had photographed extensively in Nepal, and he contacted me and said, "Hey, we're doing a fundraiser to help the widows of those killed. Can we use some of your photos?" And I said, "Absolutely." So I gave him 5 photos, and he said, "Hey, can you put this up on your Instagram page?" And we're trying to raise $100,000. And I said, "I'll send it out via email." I said, to my people, I said, "I don't do," and he was just like, "You don't do any social?" I said, "No." And they ended up raising, I think, $700,000.
Wow.
So, wow, here's this tool that will raise $700,000 for a really great cause. And so, believe me, social media for social causes, that's great. So
absolutely.
I know it's powerful, and used well, it's how can you beat that? So.
Yeah. When was your first Everest trip?
91.
91.
Yeah, the first all Sherpa ascent of Mount Everest.
Wow.
So that was actually my first story for the Yellow magazine, and they'd asked me to go do a story on the Gulf Coast of the U.S. for 9 months, and I said no. That they asked me at 25 to go do that, and I said no, I don't want to do that. And they said, "You don't want to do a story for us?" I said, "If I'm going to spend 9 months of my life on something, I want it to be something I care about. I don't care about the Gulf Coast of the U.S." I said, "More power to anybody that does. It's just not my interest."
Right.
And so I didn't hear from them for 3 months, and he said, "How about the first Sherpa ascent of Mount Everest?" And I said, "That's interesting to me."
During that 3 months, were you kicking yourself in the foot at any point, or you had faith it would work out?
I've always been somebody that just kind of goes with intuition, and I'm not going to say it's always right, but I can be at peace if something doesn't work out. It was the decision I made.
Yeah.
I don't want to just like punting on the last story for Geographic over social media. I don't have any regrets because I don't want to do it. And so it ended, but just new things opened up, just like your Pacific Trail didn't happen, right? So you had to improvise and move, and things work out.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think for me that's ultimately, my guide is just that internal feeling, and call it following your heart or intuition, whatever it is. Like, we ultimately usually know the answer. It's how much we're impacted by social expectations or others' expectations or roles or identities, and that's where everything gets confusing. But usually we end up making our way back to what we originally knew in our hearts.
Right.
It's just whether we want to lean into that or not. And I'm not saying by any means that clarity or intuition is the easy route.
No.
Because that's usually the path of most resistance.
Well, I got 3 years from my wife asking, "Are you sure you did the right thing with that?" I'm like, I know I did the right thing. So, it's like, but for her, it was just like, you.
Yeah, I think this is, which trip was this?
That's the first trip. That's in 91,
Wow.
going up to the Everest Base Camp.
And you said you carried 900 rolls of film on your back.
Yeah, this is back. I had a Sherpa carrying stuff. So I had 40 pounds of camera gear. But back then it was, no internet, no sat phones, and film. So I had 900 rolls of film, and I was there for 4 months. And so, I actually like that, being just disconnected and away from everything and immersed. Sorry, I didn't have the mic there, but just like being immersed. And so, when digital cameras came around, I was amazed that, how many times people will shoot pictures. You'll see it. You can watch any football game, college football game, if they show photographers, they're looking at the back of their cameras, or at the Olympics. And I'm just like, I had to go on just pure fear, because I worked up there for 6 weeks, didn't see a single picture because it's all film. I flew back in a Pilatus, Pilatus Porters. So the only airstrip up there is a stall strip. I flew down to Kathmandu, shipped my film via DHL, had 2 days to eat good food, and then go back up and eat lentils for another 6 weeks. I didn't see my first picture. I left in February of 91, and I saw the first pictures in August of 91.
Wow.
So
all faith.
It's all faith and fear, because
fear,
you're just fearful that you're going to screw up. And this is your first story, or every story was that way when it was filmed. It's just like, I hope I got that, But I think that's what kept, I think a lot of times with digital, you can get at the end of a day, it's 10 hours, you've been working all day, you're tired, that looks good, I think I'm done. But with film, you would just go until you couldn't shoot anymore because you were just fearful that you didn't get it. So
there's this progression of film and then working your way to Tintype as well. I imagine that's the holy grail of processing.
For me, the thing that I was attracted to, because I went from film, which really took a lot of skill set to shoot transparencies. Then I did digital, and I loved how versatile it was to be shooting at 5,000 ISO with no flash, 600 feet down in the ground. It's like, that's amazing. But in the end, the reason that I like Tintype is you're making a positive image in the camera. So there's only one. There's no negative. The only way I get prints of these is to scan the positive. If you've seen these Civil War movies, they'll show somebody holding a tintype. Well, that's what it is. It's a positive on a piece of metal. So there's only one. So it's like one object. So, when I shot 2 pictures, and the first one, he moved just a little bit. But when I got this one, I was done. You don't get 200 of them. You don't get 5 of them. So to have a one-off object, only daguerreotypes and tintypes are the only 2 photographic processes that yield one-offs.
I thought it was also interesting that everything is reversed in these pictures.
Right.
Yeah.
So, everything in photography optically is reversed anyway. These big view cameras that I use to make this, if you get underneath one, it's upside down and backwards, and that's the way your 35 millimeter camera just turns it all the proper way through the mirrors. So, if you didn't, back in the day of printing a black and white negative, you printed it emulsion side down because you wanted, if it had a word in there, you wanted to read correctly. But that's so everything is backwards here.
What was this one here?
That was actually Geographic had this series called Zip Codes, and I did one, and I just said, well, I looked up and Guantanamo Bay had a zip code, and I said, what about doing one on Guantanamo Bay, because we had the detainees there. And they said, yeah, good luck if you can get into Guantanamo with a camera. And I said, okay. So I called DC, and I ended up getting connected to this Marine that was connected to Guantanamo's operations in Washington. His last name was Kendrick. And so we chatted a while, several times over the phone, and he said, let me see what I can do. And he pulled the strings and got me on. Wow. And when I was there, the rule was you could only photograph the detainees from the back, from the shoulder blades down. And that's pretty limiting. And I was doing other things, the whole kind of Guantanamo experience, not just the detainees. But when I went with a group of other media people, this woman, Lori, who was former military, working as a contractor there, overseeing the press. And we were out, and it was just blinding white rock. And everywhere we went, every time I pulled my camera up, she'd yell out, no, no, no. And it's just...
Sounds about right. Sounds like government work.
An hour and a half. And so there was a watering station. I filled up my water bottle, and she came over, and I had my finger on the button, just finished, and she put her water bottle right under, like, okay, you're going to fill mine up. And I just looked at her, and I said, no. And I said, no. And I said, maybe. And I said, okay. And I filled it up. And I said, see how that works? I said, no, all the time is a real pain in the ass. I said, maybe gives you a little bit of hope. And yes, every now and then is throw me a bone.
Yeah.
And she's like, okay. And I said, okay, Lori, after lunch, I said, I don't want to go with the rest of the press. I want to go with you, and you let me do whatever I want. You guys get to edit all this stuff. So I said, you let me just give me 15 minutes to do. So she let me in the area where all the detainees were, and I just shot like 900 pictures in 15 minutes, knowing I wanted to throw away about 650 of them to just show that I'm giving, but I want to keep a few. And so she looked at all the pictures, and she pulls this up, and I just went over and pixelated. I said, you can't tell who that guy is. So I just pixelated the face, and I said, we'll come back to that. So I'd throw out 75, I'd get to another one I really wanted, and I'd pixelate the face. And we just went back and forth like that, and she let me keep 20 images, and like this. And so as soon as I left that, I went back to where I was bunking up. Mm-hmm. I made copies on copies, put it in the computer in case she changed her mind. I wanted to have it. And I even put in the dirty underwear bag I had, like taped it.
Smuggled it
just
out.
Like
prison style.
Yeah. So it was, this was challenging. But again, I think in the end, it's just my interest in people and trying to connect and find a way to, with these people, it's connecting on that bullshit kind of level, get their acceptance. With Lori, it was a different level, but, in the end, it's just all kind of trying to find a connection and a way to connect.
Right, yeah. How to communicate with people.
Yeah.
Well, let's open it up to the room. I'd like to get into a Q&A here. So if anybody has any questions, we'll go ahead and pass this mic around, and we'll shoot and see what we can touch on for Rob. Anybody got any questions?
Which of the cowboys that you ever interviewed was the most memorable, and why?
Well, probably have to be two.
Okay, you can give me two.
Two.
That works.
Royce Hansen, the guy in the beginning. If you listen to his full interview, the thing I like about Royce is how raw and open he is, and kind of sharing his mistakes in life. Because if you listen to the full interview, he's, right after he says what was played up here, he said, have a pretty good wife, probably ruined her with all this business. But he's at the end of his career. He's 70, and he's just basically real reflective of what he loves about it, but also, maybe the hardship he put his family through, his wife especially. And I just like that he was open enough to share that, because a lot of guys might not, they're tough, they're whatever. So he was great. And then I laughed when Justin Case.
I was wondering about him. You had a very big reaction.
Well, because his name is Justin Rogers, and he represents the far end. Royce is the end of the career. Ronnie Melton, he's got 2 kids. He's kind of midlife, married, and Justin is young, he's single, he's feral, he is just a wild dude. And, he says, he goes on to talk about, every now and then a feller wants to rope something just to hear it beller. He said, I just like to aggravate cows, kick a dog, just be happy, And I saw Justin a year after I took the picture at the World Champion Working Cowboy Rodeo in Amarillo, Texas. And it was 10 o'clock, it's Sunday morning, and he was already drunk, had a 6-pack of beer, walking around the exhibit hall looking at saddles and stuff, and he's just funny. He's just
Royce Hansen.
Yeah, so he's just a funny character on the other end of the spectrum, just the wild single guy. Yeah. No.
Other than Everest, where was like the most remote place you went where you felt like you were like, if something went, something goes down Everest, yeah, it's scary, but like, where was the most remote place other than that?
Remote, like isolated?
Like isolated, yeah.
Antarctica. I went to Stonington Island, which is below the Antarctic Polar Circle, for 8 weeks, and it was right after the Nepal story. So after the Sherpa story in '91, they asked me to do a story on Robert E. Lee, and I said, I have no interest in Robert E. Lee. And so then they called for another story. I said, no interest in that. And they weren't used to people saying no, but I just know that my time, and over the years I worked for them, I'd be gone 180 to 300 days of the year. So the ability to connect with people locally and have really in-depth friends. All my friends are basically, my closest friends are from college. And so, if you're going to give up, it better be something you're interested in. And so they called and said, okay, we need you to go to Antarctica. And I said, well, I don't live in Texas because I love the cold. And he said, well, the photographer that was assigned to go there didn't pass a Navy physical. And the reason, the Navy was the only place that was going to be able to extract somebody if there was a medical condition. And so the Navy's requirement was that you had to pass a Navy physical. So I had to fly to D.C. and do a physical, and I passed it. And so they said, you got to go do this for us because we're in a bind. They're leaving in 2 weeks. So I went down there, and it was interesting. Again, this is 1992, and so they're ham radio operators doing the communication. And it was kind of funny because there was a guy from British Antarctic Survey who was from Scotland, and I could not understand this guy. I mean, every time he spoke, I had to have him repeat it 3 times because he had such a strong Scottish accent. And we would get to communicate once a week with somebody at home. And so at the time, my girlfriend, I'd make a communication and they'd do this thing over, where the guy would flip the switch over. And Jeannie would say something that was intimate. And I had to announce to her that, hey, this is an open mic. There's 10 other guys here, no women. So you might, and it was funny because the writer on the story, Mike Parfit, he tried desperately to get a hold of his girlfriend for 6 weeks. And she was never available. And I said, Mike, are you sure she's not a ghost? I said, she's never shown up. So there was a lot of fun ribbing going on about that. But that was isolated. And I'm not a big landscape person, but love the environment. But man, that was pretty dramatic that when we took the boat back through a lot of these channels, just looking out and knowing that, a lot of what you're looking at has never been set foot on by people is pretty amazing to think about,
Beautiful. Any other questions? Yeah, with someone. Let's get that mic.
Sounds like you've been all over the place.
A few places.
Are there any experiences or people that you've met that have affected how you think or your values?
Absolutely. I mean, I think, the happiest people, prior to the internet, the happiest people I ever met were always people that were disconnected from communication because they had their family, immediate family, their extended family, their faith, and their community. So they never seemed unhappy. After the internet became pretty widely available, I mean, I think people then all of a sudden have a yardstick on how bad they have it, in their eyes, or what they don't have. And but probably one of the most powerful things, I was in India photographing this story. I went to 12 different countries on the impact of industrial fishing and how it impacts local artisanal fishermen. And I was in India and I was photographing this guy on the beach repairing nets, and just beautiful over in the state of Kerala. And after I spent about an hour there, and again, it's so many people are gracious to allow me to even just be there and photograph what they're doing, and that was always appreciated because I always remember, a lot of Americans probably wouldn't allow or feel comfortable having a foreigner just pop into their space and start taking photographs. But I never had really any bad experiences, except Egypt and Qatar. But that's just more of a cultural thing than personal. But anyway, when I finished photographing this guy, I went over to get his name, and he had polio and he couldn't walk. And so he asked the interpreter, Arvind, if we could come and meet his wife and his kids for tea that evening. This guy is like poorer than you can even imagine. And we went there that evening and had tea, and his wife came to the door, and she also had polio. And what he wanted to do is show me his 2 kids who were perfectly healthy. And it was just, just kind of really, that experience was pretty powerful for me because, we look around at what we don't have or whatever, and I look and always remember, and that was in 1994, so whatever that is, 27 years ago, and it still sits with me as a real powerful thing. Just this guy lived in a 400 square foot thing, house, if you could call it that, and he was so proud of his 2 kids and working really hard, no complaint, nothing. Just a beautiful smile while I was photographing him before I knew he had a disability, and then sharing tea, sharing. He has nothing. So, yeah, I mean, there's, I've had, last couple of years, I've had going through some struggles, but I always remind myself I'm not a Syrian refugee. I'm not a woman in Afghanistan under Taliban. My problems are pretty first world compared to, so I think being out and seeing so many things and how few things other people have and comforts other people have always made me just grateful for what I do have and not to ever take it for granted. So
thank you for sharing that wisdom.
Yeah. I think that's an incredible lesson in that is, that there's a lot of people in our society now that, want to do the finger pointing or talk bad about, the opportunities that they were basically born into. And I think to take that for granted or to bitch and moan about it, it's just a complete waste of time. And we can ask ourselves, all right, we have these platforms. How can we use them? If we're born into, a good situation or we're fortunate to have resources, then we have to use them. And there's almost no part of this world that we can't reach now with platforms, with technology. And we can come together and truly
sure.
help.
Yeah.
So let's get any other questions.
Hi, Rob.
Hey, how are you?
Good.
Hey, Mom. You gonna say hi to me or what?
Hey, Evan. I just wanted to ask you, after you've been all around in all these beautiful places, what brought you back to Austin, Texas?
Education, I guess. My kids, we lived in Mexico, moved to Mexico when our kids were 6 and 8, and I just felt like they were both fluent in Spanish already, and I wanted them to have the experience of living in a different country and a country that has plenty of challenges going on, so they have a real perspective on how fortunate they are. But middle school got in the way, and it was pretty bad middle school down there, so we made a choice and came back to what we thought was going to be a great experience in dripping school system. And the first thing the counselor asked, she said, well, your kids have been in Montessori school, a private Mexican school, and you've homeschooled for a year. Can I ask if they can read and write? And I said, yeah, I think they've got that covered. And she went on to say how, well, kids with homeschooling and these kinds of educational backgrounds, they need to learn how to fit into our program and this and that. And I just said to her, I said, well, it sounds like a 1920s way of breaking a horse. I said, you tie it to a post, whip the shit out of it until it'll take a saddle. And I said, my boys aren't going to do that. I said, they're going to take control. And I said, if that doesn't work for you, then it's good to know that. So we ended up homeschooling for 3 more years and I think I don't know if I was telling you or I think, I told Pat, right?
Nobody ever gets us confused.
Yeah, no, it's the beards, right? But so I was telling Pat that, we studied ancient history for 8 months, and we went to Egypt, Turkey, Greece, and Italy for 6 weeks to go see everything they'd studied so they could experience. And, we're fortunate that my job and my wife was, she's self-employed, so we had the flexibility of doing this. And I, again, just want them to know perspective on America is not normal in any way as far as what we have. And we landed, I was telling Pat, we got there the day Mubarak got taken out of control. It was during Arab Spring. And so we were supposed to land in Cairo a week after Mubarak and got overthrown. And my wife said, we're not going. And I called all these people I'd worked with in Egypt before. I said, it appears to be, if a foreigner had been scratched in these demonstrations, it would be on the front page of the New York Times as some kind of attack. So I said, there's nothing. They said, oh, it's safe. It's safe. So we got there, and Tahrir Square had tens of thousands of people, and we got to go to Giza when there were 6 foreigners there instead of 30,000, and spent 2 weeks in Egypt with nobody, hardly there. And I took my kids down to Tahrir Square and held on to the back of their collars and just walked them around and said, we're here for ancient history, but this is, current history, and just take it all in. And so that's what got us back. The 4 best years were down in Mexico for sure. So I was happy to be there, and, came back, and there's 18 peanut butters here at HEB instead of 1 down in Mexico. So that was the upside, coming back.
That sounded like a Jimmy Buffett song.
Yeah, right.
Peanut
butter.
Let's get 1 or 2 more questions. We got them. Yeah. Let's get the mic. Quick. Thank you.
What made you want to start taking pictures? Like, how early in your life were you interested in it?
I wanted to be a truck driver, because I wanted to get out of the small town I was in. And when we would go on vacation, my dad got transferred to Nebraska when I was like 4, so we would come back to Texas and visit family, and I would make him stop at the truck stops to get gas so I could take pictures of all the trucks. And so I don't know if there was something there. And then my uncle was in Vietnam, and he shot a lot of photos, and he gave me a lot of his albums with all his pictures from his time in Vietnam, and that was pretty pivotal, and that was when I was 12. And then Don McCullen is a war photographer from the UK, and I bought a book of his called Hearts of Darkness, and that just kind of, latched me in just because the power of the photographs, and I was just like, but never did I think I was going to make a living at it. It was just all kind of happened, fell into place. So I was lucky.
Thank you.
Yep.
Anybody else? All right.
Out of everywhere you've been, who were the most inviting and influential people, and why?
Inviting and influential. It's hard to say. I mean, so many people have been, kind and generous and saved my bacon. I've had, a guy in Haiti really saved my bacon. So I don't know. It's hard to say, give any one group these cowboys. Everybody that I've photographed for the most part that have allowed me to be there. I remember being at a wedding in India, and the family let me come up to the altar during their deal, and they pour rice over each other because it's a sign of it's all the things positive in India are reflected in rice, prosperity, family. And that's why they pour it over each other. We don't know that's why we do it, but it comes from India. And I remember, after that was all over, I was back in the bridesmaid room where the bride was, and they carry her out in a basket. And, a lot of really intimate scenes. And I kept thinking to myself afterwards, I don't know how many American people to be wed would allow an Indian photographer to come in these intimate scenes. So it's hard to say any one group. I just think I'm pretty grateful to all of them for just allowing me to come in. But a lot of fond memories of a lot of things. The guy with polio, the Cowboys, just all of them. The guy in India that, saved me from probably a $35,000 payment on a car that I rolled. So he got me out of a budget fix. So,
well, thank you so much, Robb. I think just simple stories, and it's just it's inspiring to hear, when you open your heart and you focus on relationships and individuals and people and want to, give them a voice. If you have that capacity, how much that can give you as an individual. Took you around the world, and we can all do that in our own unique ways. Really excited, that Robb joined us tonight.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, we'll have a continued friendship and lots to look forward to in this life. But I want to thank everyone for participating. We've got Keith Sanders coming up next. Full circle here. I met Keith probably back in early October over at Whiskey Tango Foxtrot, and I was talking to the Reverend Few, who played the last podcast, the husband and wife duo, Nick and Paige. And I was talking to them. I was doing some pop-up concepts at the time. I was looking to book a band, and Keith came up to me. He was bartending at the time, and was like, "Yo, I just heard you talking to Nick and Paige. I'm a musician as well." He plugged me his card, and I was like, "Oh, I love the hustle." And then here we are, like 8 months later, however long it's been, or a year, and just incredibly grateful that we'll continue to showcase locals and Austin culture here, no matter where you're from. But we're all contributing in such beautiful ways. So let's all grab a drink and kick off the music and have a good time tonight. All right, one last time for Robb.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.